Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm filming this. I have to submit it to a speakers bureau, so hopefully it all goes well. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I'm Holly Bellebuono. I've worked on a project that turned into this book. It was a 7-year project. I got to travel quite a bit to different countries. I got to meet a lot of astounding, extraordinary people. And I was looking for people for this project who fit my criteria as they love plants or they worked with plants. But what it turned into was a much broader experience of people, women in particular, who are mentors for other people, who use their love and experience with plants and healing to shepherd other people into states of health and professions of health. It also became a collective of people who really promote self-confidence. A lot of the healers that I spoke with, especially the indigenous healers, were very firm in their belief that true healing, the ability to help someone, really requires a certain measure of self-confidence. And that was a key component of many of the people that I spoke with. And so they're working on themselves, building up this confidence of themselves, and also taking under their wing the next generation and helping them and supporting them in their endeavors and bringing them up. So let's let go of all the traffic, all the Boston traffic. Let's let it go, because we're going to take a time travel trip. We're going to go back in time, and some of the people that all of the people that I'm featuring in this book, there's 31 women from 20 countries and 16 healing traditions. They're all women, and I chose women for a very particular reason, because all throughout high school and college and graduate school, I was learning about people who did extraordinary things: researchers, scientists, chemists, inventors, germ theory people who were very inventive and creative and insightful, but they were all men. They did wonderful things, but I never heard about women doing the same types of things. And I could count on one hand the number of women that I could name in these very advanced professions: Marie Curie, Elizabeth Blackwell, a couple of others, and then I just ran out of names. We just weren't taught these things. And so, working as a gardener and an herbalist, I knew that women were very involved in plants and plant research and propagation and understanding of plant cycles and science in general and research. And so I wanted to celebrate these women and bring them out to the forefront and let people know about them, both from the past and the present. So we're going to start way back in the past in Egypt. And we're going to go back to 1421 BC to someone who's not known as an herbalist or a gardener or a plant person. She's known as the pharaoh. Hatshepsut was the pharaoh of Egypt in this 26-year reign of hers. She ruled her country as a man. She wore the headdress, she wore the beard that indicated pharaohship and manhood, even though everyone knew she was a woman. She was a really good ruler. And one thing that she did was she took charge of her navy. And she sent her navy on an expedition to the land of Punt, P-U-N-T, which we think is present-day Somalia. And I want to make a note of the watercolors. These portraits are all original commissioned for this book, for my project. So I researched what these women may have looked like and worn, and I held really fun photo sessions with a lot of women that I knew, dressed up as these women may have looked. And then from these photos, I hired a local watercolor artist who painted their portraits. And I really wanted them to look very human and likable and personable, so that you could really get a feel for this person really existed, and this is what she may have looked like. This is how she looks today. She sent her navy on the expedition to Punt, and they were gone for a long time. Probably people expected them never to return because they were gone for 3 years. When they finally did come back, their boats were laden with all sorts of exotic things that either they had never seen before or that they had seen but were incredibly precious. They came back with gold and silver and pearls and ostrich feathers and lions and tigers and elephant tusks and slaves, people that they brought back. But they also came back with plants. And 2 of the plants that they returned with from this incredible expedition really influenced their culture for years and years, and they have come down to influence us today. One of them is myrrh. And we can see myrrh on the inscriptions on her palace, which still stands today in the desert. These are myrrh shrubs, and the balls of the roots have been wrapped up in burlap so they can be transported and replanted. They brought them back to replant around her palace. And of course, we use myrrh today. You see it in Tom's mouthwash. You see it in all sorts of places, but it's a really valuable herb. They cut the trunk of the shrub to get the resin that exudes out as a hard resinous substance. And from that, we get an antibacterial substance. They used it in Hatshepsut's time as a embalming agent. They used it as a ceremonial agent. They burned it as an incense, of course. It smells very fragrant and lovely. So it was a very valuable commodity as well as a spiritual ceremonial ingredient. And this is myrrh. They also brought back seeds of a plant that was very special to them, very sacred actually, lettuce. And we don't normally think of lettuce as very sacred, but they did, mostly because, I think, when you snap a lettuce leaf or a stalk off the plant in the garden, it exudes this white, milky latex substance. Well, that was very symbolic to them. It was a fertility symbol of either breast milk or semen. So it represented rebirth, renewal, regeneration. It was very emblematic to them of the possibility of new life. And so they grew it. They found very shallow, large pools around her palace where they filled these pools with water, very, very shallow, and grew the lettuce in these pools because it was a desert, arid atmosphere. In fact, lettuce was sacred to the god Khem, Khem, in Hatshepsut's time in Egypt. He's often depicted in art as holding a stalk of lettuce as a fertility symbol, and from his name we get chemistry and alchemy. And then this is one of my favorites, Maria Prophetessa. So we're still in Egypt, but we've moved ahead in time about 1,500 years. So she's in Alexandria, which is the center of commerce, flourishing arts. People from all over the world are coming, and she is hiding out in her laboratory because she's an inventor and a chemist. And she even goes by different names. She creates aliases for herself, Maria Prophetessa, Maria the Jewess, Maria of Cleopha. And people think that it's probably because she's hiding from people who want to steal her work. She's very well known as an inventor. And we actually use several of her inventions today. One is the bain de Marie. In the kitchen, when you want to melt butter or chocolate, you put it in a pot above another pot full of water. That's her invention. It's named after Marie Prophetessa. She's also credited by scientists with discovering sulfuric acid, which is sometimes called Mary's Black. It was most likely an accident, but it did come to something, and she's given the credit for that. Most importantly, we credit her with inventing the distillation machine. She created the still. Long before Avicenna, she's in the 1st century roughly, Egypt, and she created this 3-chambered unit that revolutionized cosmetics and perfumery and medicine. So what she would do is in the bottom chamber here that was brick or stone, she would build a fire. And then above that are the 3 core chambers of her tribecos, is what she called it. And we know that she called it this because she wrote a book called the Maria Practicum, which has since been lost, but other historic writers have referred to it, and so we get this information from that. In that first chamber, she would have water and herbs, making a tea, basically a hot infusion. And of course, the water would evaporate up through into that second chamber on top. Well, what would come with it? The herbs won't come with it, the fiber. The resins and tannins and alkaloids and flavonoids and glycosides and polyphenols, they don't come up. They're not quite volatile enough. The only thing volatile enough to rise up with the evaporating water are the essential oils, the volatile oils called terpenes. So the water and the terpenes rise up. They get collected in that little circular thing. Well, around that circular thing is cold water. Immediately recondenses everything so that it slides down through the glass or ceramic pipe into the 3rd chamber, which is where things really get interesting, because there's a lot of reproduction terminology used with that 3rd chamber, very celestial, cosmic terminology. She called it the fluid that ended up in there, she called it amniotic fluid. She would often put a copper seed in the bottom. It was very birth-oriented, and she's approaching it not only from the vantage of a chemist. She was an alchemist, meaning she wanted to convert substances into gold, but she was a Gnostic alchemist. And Gnostics were very involved with, they were preoccupied with helping the spirit escape from the body, separating spirit from matter. So she's into transformation. She's a transcendentalist. She worked to move substances into gold, as well as to move substances in a separate direction from spirit and vapor. And of course, from this machine, this very simple machine, we get aromatherapy, we get hydrosols, flower waters, because in this third section are the essential oils mixed with the water, which is hydrosol, or since they don't mix, on the top layer will form the essential oils, and if you have the proper pipette or small devices, you can extract just the essential oils, which are incredibly antiseptic, very antimicrobial, really good at killing germs. So it probably helped not only with cosmetics, because people use them on their faces, but to actually improve immune response to infection. In her book, she did all sorts of geometrical designs. She had geometrical theorems. She was very mathematically oriented, and it was all very cosmic. But it was all, not all, but most of it was plant-based. And we think that she probably used yellow plants because of her fascination with gold as an alchemist, herbs such as tansy, goldenrod, and then especially alchemilla, lady's mantle. Partly because the flowers are yellow, and partly because the dew that collects on the flowers in many cultures, not just hers, is considered sacred and magical, especially Gaelic cultures. It's very auspicious to wash your face with the dew that collects on the leaves in the morning. So this is another one of my favorites, and I included her in the book. She's not a healer, she's a poisoner. But she was fascinating, and I think she really influenced our use of herbs and our understanding of pharmacology. So I don't know if you can tell, this is me. That's my portrait. I couldn't ask anybody else to be the poisoner. So she has a really fascinating story. So it's kind of wicked. So Emperor Claudius, he started it all. He's the emperor. He is married to Messalina. Messalina is a crazy girl in herself. She has lots of stories about sexual exploits and weird things that she does. Well, Britannicus is their son. Eventually, Messalina dies, and Agrippina scoots into the territory to sweep in and become Emperor Claudius's new wife. She already has a son, Nero, who is a teenager. Britannicus is 13, very close to 14. Agrippina hires, we think, most likely, Locusta to poison Emperor Claudius. This is the famous, he ate the dish of poisoned mushrooms incident. And he dies. Well, Britannicus should take over the throne. He's the next in line. But Agrippina makes it so that Nero becomes the emperor, and he takes over. That's not enough, right? They want Nero to have no competition. They want to get rid of Britannicus completely. So Agrippina and Nero hire Locusta again, and they say, we want you to kill Britannicus, get him out of the picture, make it look like an accident, which is pretty commonplace at this point in time because poisoning is rampant. Everybody is poisoning each other. Husbands are poisoning wives, children are poisoning their parents. It's everywhere. In fact, Nero schedules a banquet and has everybody come to the banquet. This is where he's planning to kill Britannicus. Everyone shows up with their food tasters. It's just commonplace. Everywhere you go, you have your food taster because poisoning is everywhere. So Locusta comes up with a poison before this banquet, and they give it to Britannicus, and he gets very sick, violently sick, but he recovers. So they throw Locusta in jail, and they say, you failed. If you can't kill this boy and do it successfully, we're going to execute you. So they bring in all of these plants and substances, arsenic and lead and all these different plants such as yew and probably foxglove. And she experiments and brews and puts things together. They finally bring in a pig, or no, I think it's a goat first, and the goat dies. They say, good. They bring in the pig. The pig dies. The pig is bigger. So they say, now that we know that this dose is successful, it will likely kill the boy. So they have this banquet, lots of people at this banquet, lots of food testers at the banquet. Britannicus has served his food, everything's fine. He's poured wine. They serve the wine hot. It's too hot for him, so he asks for it to be cooled with the cold water. That's where they put the poison, because the tester did not test the cold water. They cool off the wine, he drinks it, he falls to the floor having convulsions. People get up to help him, and Nero blocks them and says, don't worry, he's having an epileptic fit, it's a seizure, it will pass. They had people pick him up and take him from the room, and he later died. He had just turned 14. So Nero is the supreme ruler, but he's still not happy enough. He still tries to kill his mother, Agrippina. And there are many records of him trying to poison her. He tried to sink a ship that she was sailing in. It goes on and on. Meanwhile, it was an odyssey. Meanwhile, Locusta is taken out of prison. She's put in a nice state house, given grounds where she can grow her plants, and Nero even helps her establish a school so that she can teach other people the art of poisoning. And it's rumored that they become lovers, Nero and Locusta. But it didn't last long regardless, because Nero was dethroned by Galba in AD 69. So Nero and both Locusta were executed shortly after that. And then 2 weeks after Galba was on the throne, he was executed and somebody else came on. And this is a yew tree, the Taxus genus, which is where we get the word toxin. And digitalis, the foxglove. So Trotula of Salerno, and I love this portrait because she's smiling, and I really get the feeling that she's a helpful, warm, personable person. She was, many people think, the chair of medicine at the University of Salerno in roughly 1200, which was a huge university. It was actually the first medical university in Europe. And she was not only the chair teaching, but she also ran a clinic for women and girls at the university. So people were coming to her all the time with different issues, illnesses, but especially OBGYN issues. And I get my information from her from one particular resource, which is called the Trotula, and it's translated by Monica Green directly from texts that are attributed to Trotula. And there are two. One is the Trotula Major, which is a scientific clinical treatise on disease and immune control and response using medicines. And the Trotula Minor, which is a completely different tone. It's kind of fluffy, and it's how to make yourself pretty.